Every year, more than 300,000 people clinically die and come back. Not a handful. Not rare edge cases. 300,000 people per year in the United States alone. And around 20% of them describe the same thing. The same images, the same sensations, the same specific details, regardless of culture, age, or religion. Either this is the largest collective hallucination in the history of our species, or it's something else entirely. But before we get there, let's start with what's actually happening inside your brain the moment your heart stops. Because what scientists are measuring doesn't fit any existing model of consciousness. In 2013, neuroscientist Borjigin at the University of Michigan ran an experiment that changed everything we thought we knew about the dying brain. She connected rats to an electroencephalograph and stopped their hearts. According to every existing theory, the brain should have gone quiet. No oxygen, no neurons firing. It seemed obvious. The opposite happened. In the first 30 seconds after cardiac arrest, brain activity didn't drop. It surged. Neurons began synchronizing at frequencies never observed in living animals. Gamma waves, the same waves associated with higher cognitive function, conscious awareness, and focused attention, spiked to levels several times higher than anything recorded during normal wakefulness. The brain of a dying rat was more active than the brain of a rat solving a complex problem. Borjigin wrote that the data suggested the dying brain is capable of generating intense, conscious experience. That was the careful version. The implication behind it was far less careful. In 2023, a team from that same University of Michigan ran the equivalent study on humans. 4 patients with irreversible brain injuries were on life support. With family consent, the machines were turned off, and as their hearts stopped, scientists recorded every shift in brain activity. In 2 of the 4 patients, exactly what happened to Borjigin's rats happened here. A sharp surge in gamma activity, synchronization between brain regions that typically only fire together during deep concentration or lucid dreaming. All of this in a brain whose heart had already stopped beating. The researchers said they couldn't explain it. They wrote that they didn't know what it meant. That was a rare moment of honesty in scientific literature. Because the data was pointing somewhere, science wasn't ready to go. Now let's go back to those 300,000 people. In 2014, cardiologist Sam Parnia at New York University completed the largest study of near-death experiences ever conducted. It was called AWARE, Awareness During Resuscitation. For 4 years, his team studied patients who survived cardiac arrest across hospitals in the UK and the US. The results were uncomfortable. Around 40% of survivors reported some form of conscious experience during clinical death. Around 20% described the classic sequence: a tunnel, light, profound peace, encounters with others. But the strangest finding was one specific case. A patient described the details of his own resuscitation with an accuracy that couldn't be explained by chance. He described specific actions a nurse took. He described the sound of a particular machine. He described the exact moment a doctor said a specific phrase. All of it was verified by the medical staff present. His heart was not beating during this time. His brain was not receiving oxygen. Parnia wrote that this was the first verified case of conscious perception during cardiac arrest. But here's where the story gets genuinely strange. Most people assume the brain is consciousness. That consciousness is simply a byproduct of neural activity. Turn off the neurons, turn off the experience. This is called the neural correlate of consciousness, and it's the dominant theory in modern neuroscience. The data from Borjigin and Parnia doesn't disprove that theory directly, but it creates a crack in it that's impossible to ignore. If the brain generates a surge of activity at the moment of death, maybe that's exactly what explains near-death experiences. A dying brain producing one final, intense burst of consciousness. A last neurological firework. That's the rational explanation. But it doesn't explain the verified cases. It doesn't explain how a patient with a non-functioning brain could accurately describe specific spoken words. It doesn't explain why the descriptions are nearly identical across people who never met each other and grew up in entirely different cultures. In 2022, neuroscientist Christof Koch, one of the world's leading researchers on consciousness, published a paper that caused significant debate in the scientific community. Koch had spent his entire career as a committed materialist. He believed consciousness was fully explained by the mechanics of neurons. In this paper, he wrote that the data from the past decade had made him question that position. Not abandon it, question it. For a scientist of his standing, that was a loud statement. He wrote that science now faces a question it cannot yet answer. Does consciousness exist independently of the brain? Or is the brain simply the instrument through which it operates? Here's what we know for certain. At the moment of death, your brain does something unexpected. It doesn't go quiet. It activates. It generates patterns of activity that in a living person are associated with the highest levels of conscious awareness. This happens beyond any known energy source. The heart has stopped. The oxygen has stopped. What exactly you experience in that moment, science doesn't know. That's the last honest answer it can give. But here's what's strange. Every person who has ever lived has gone through this. Every person you have ever loved, every person you have ever lost. And not one of them could come back and tell you what came next, except for those 300,000 people a year who do come back, and who all describe the same thing.